Hello, everyone. It is Angelo Robles at Family Office TV, doing an actual live, not a recorded live, today on Saturday morning. So if there are any comments or questions, I'll be direct at the moment. As you could see, unfortunately, with a little bit of a technical glitch, I did have to go audio only on the live today. So the good news for all of you is you don't have to look at me. The bad news is I know it's not quite as dynamic to be audio, but I shall do the best that I can. So my discussion today is around a summary of my trip to Europe, what I learned from multiple, not one, not two, not three, I think the number was six, multiple dynastic families that go back over 750 years. And in the US, we're not used to that. That's actually not really possible. So to me, it was an incredible experience being a student of wealth, of dynastic families, of family offices, and traveling primarily to Austria, a wonderful country, in Vienna, and a little bit of some of the surrounding countries for a short amount of times. I've been to Europe before, but this was kind of a special experience. So I figured, although I know I have written about it, I know I've shared some interviews that I actually did and pictures, and more to come. But I wanted to give like I said, a summary of my trip that some of you may find of value. So my journeys over the years to Europe have always been enriching, full of amazing experiences, learning, and always meeting new friends. My recent trip to Austria was incredibly valuable to me, as I mentioned. I met amazing families, some with generational legacies that spanned really beyond our comprehension. My numbers go up from six if I factor in 500-year-old families that have a level of dynastic wealth. So the family history lessons shared with me on culture, on leadership, and governance, as well as the assets that have withstood the test of turbulent times, have helped me to broaden my understanding of dynastic families and really leading to true family continuity, which I would believe in my experiences for decades in the community and the work that I do among dynastic families and family offices. For most, not all, they're all different. For most, the end game really is family continuity. After 20 years in the community and traveling the world, I'd like to hope I'm forever, if nothing else, a lifelong learner. This trip, I think more than all others, made me wiser about the community that I love and hopefully some insights that I could share. I wish it could have been by video, but audio and being live at the moment is, I hope, better than nothing. It's more than culture, leadership, and governance. I learn history, which I do love, kind of how the world works and assets that such families, having survived turbulent times over and over again, have owned over the centuries. Some of the insights I'll share in this video to give back and, I guess, to enrich the community, and other aspects that are more granular, including actual assets, introductions, and kind of how to execute, are for my SFO continuity members, my family office masterclass participants, and my consultative relationships. Before I go further, wanted to give a shout out to the trip would not have been possible if it wasn't for a gentleman named Alexander Galambos, a wonderful businessman in Europe. And I look forward to furthering my relationship with him, and met a lot of wonderful people, primarily thanks to the efforts of Alexander. He also introduced me to, now I know what real hot chocolate is. It's not what we have here in the US. So Austria has some amazing places. I'll have to compare it to Switzerland next time. It may give it a run for its money, but the people were incredible to me. The city of Vienna primarily was so beautiful. Shout out to the hotel where I stayed at, the Grand, which I highly recommend if you go to Vienna. Again, I had a wonderful time, not just from learning, but I want to have a good social time as well. So from a cultural and social perspective, it was a wonderful experience indeed. And I did, in case you're wondering, yes, I did, everyone, bring my black 10-gallon Stetson cowboy hat. Safe to say it might have stood out a little bit in Vienna, and I did hit up a cigar bar or two along the way. How about that? You know, I have to do some of that. So each successful individual brings something of value to others, no matter whether they're first generation or whether they're 50. Nothing beats curated access, face-to-face interactions, the collision of wisdom and ideas, and results that are best facilitated in person. Listen, having founded and ran Family Office Association for many a year, and hosted over 400 events. And I know I'm not as active hosting events now. I do understand when they're done right, which is practically almost never, but when they're done right, they're special. I love Zoom as much as the next person in digital. I love the streams that I'm doing, including right now, but nothing beats the opportunity of traveling, of getting a little bit out of your comfort zone and having connections and mentors and meeting with people that are strategic, that is an effective and efficient use of your time. And yes, the word efficient would still apply, even though it's way less efficient per se than digital. But again, maybe efficiency makes us weak. That's a different discussion for a little bit of a different time. But to me, nothing beats it. I desire to build something special in what I'm doing at SFO Continuity and my related companies. Like I said, Family Office Masterclass and my media arm that you're technically hearing this from, Family Office TV. Salient intellect and resources, the opportunity to travel, experiences, meeting a true network of global peers. So yes, I did kind of quasi co-host, I guess you could say, an event or two when I was in Vienna, and it was amazing. What a great experience where I got a chance to both meet and further relationships with these families. And these weren't just meet and greet, these were deep dives. And the fact that some of them, multiple of them, including the iconic Habsburg family of Austria, were kind enough to allow video interviews. Now, that latter one hasn't been released yet. There's some editing work that's being done. Hopefully you'll be ready by this week. But again, they were very generous with their time and open, looking to help others. So I do greatly appreciate that. Nothing beats the opportunity. I'll even go as far as saying traveling with me on these treks, on these journeys, which again, there's opportunity for. And I hope some of you could move forward of that with me in the future. So several members and my recent masterclass participants have already connected with me on, I guess you could say, how rising generations can participate in upcoming and enriching learning access and introductions, really from around the world, gaining new perspectives. Imagine if you're a dynastic family, a newer family to wealth. And it's not just you. How about your children, your grandchildren? The opportunity of meeting peers around the world in Europe and other travels I'll have upcoming in the Middle East and in Asia later this year. So to me, this is what it's about. I really do look to be kind of somewhat, I guess you could say, at least a global family office citizen, and the opportunity that I don't think others are really providing that are going to be as enriching in terms of as what I'm doing. So many of you, as I mentioned, are familiar with my focus on true family continuity, which really is far more than just wealth preservation. Sovereign risk, in particular, are very, very real. Governmental, monetary policy, inflationary, regulatory, confiscation, civil disorder. My masterclass, Sovereign Risk and Disaster Preparedness for Family Offices, is the most comprehensive educational program on that subject ever in the community. And that did interplay in my trip in Vienna and broadly in Europe, because again, these are families, the ones that I mentioned that go back, whatever, 500 to really 1100 years, multiple and multiple and multiple of them. They all understand because they all had it taken from them. They all understand the area of sovereign risk. Much, much more, by the way, than the vast majority of American families. So this trip clarified my fears, my thoughts, and solutions on that subject, and effectively the ultimate collective of solutions to family continuity. Again, I've been in this for decades. I'd like to think of myself as a deeper thinker, as a thought leader, who probably touches upon subjects on a deeper level than probably what most people are used to in the family office world. And I have a lot of connections, thousands of family offices around the world. This trip advanced me by years in terms of what I learned about a subject, specifically on continuity and on sovereign risk, that I'm confident and capable in terms of my capabilities on. It took it to another level. This is not just theoretical in the classroom. However, real immersion and interaction with those that I met that have had everything taken from them and still persevered and reestablished. It's far more than jurisdictional optionality that matters, the right assets to diversify into, and how to custody that is key. However, also a diversified, let me go with the word on-demand global network that is most important. It's your resources are more than just your financial capital. I get it. That's very important. It's your knowledge, your ability to articulate your knowledge, the impact you have from a variety of perspectives, and the level of connectivity and power and access to a network that is more than just local or regional, more than just in country, although all important, but truly global. Join me in this journey as a lifelong learner, and I believe we could all make a true impact and really dedicate ourselves to family continuity. So European history, to me, is very fascinating and enriching in many ways. History may not repeat itself. However, it does rhyme. And by the way, Blue, I think you sent a comment, and keep comments coming in. Happy New Year to you as well. So by understanding history, psychology, and evolutionary biology and psychology, we can become better historians, I guess you could say, of humanity and reality. This provides a family office with a playbook for behaviors, actions, and assets to address what I would say is an uncertain future. Being a historian is noble. However, it's not enough. You need to also be a revolutionary. You need to have the ability to see around corners. So then marrying a historian's perspective with that of a revolutionary is rare, and that truly leads to being empowered. In my future writing and videos, I look forward to exploring the history leading into the modern world, at least the modern Western world, and having an understanding from my trips to Europe, and again, with the US and that interaction, looking at the Franks, the Vikings, the Dutch, the Italians, the Spaniards, the French, the Brits, all played significantly into the Western world and eventually the United States as we know it now. Now, we'll save that history lesson and how it weaves into families and the cultural imprint, I guess you could say, on the United States. Being someone who does wear 10-gallon black Stetson cowboy hats and loves the American West and loves my great state, of course, of Wyoming. Even I didn't know. Now, there happens to be a TV show. It's by the same person who did Yellowstone, a great show. This one's even better, 1883. So I highly recommend you all check out 1883. I didn't really understand, like, populating the West really after, I guess, the Louisiana Purchase and some other initiatives by the US government was incredibly difficult. And I didn't know that ads were literally placed like in the Romanian times in like mid 70s into early 1880s in Ireland about telling people to come here. We're going to give you free land. Now, they didn't tell them about how challenging in many, many ways it was going to be. But, kudos to those very tough, rugged, and entrepreneurial Europeans for taking that journey and doing a lot of the work that really led to kind of the greatness that immigrants did provide, including my background with my family, although not from the perspective I described with the American West, but a notch or two later. But I do find, to me, those topics to be very intriguing and probably not things you're normally hearing about in others that are talking about the family office world. So back to where I began, as lessons learned through turbulent times by multiple European families whose wealth began hundreds to over, two of them, over 1,000 years ago. So among the questions I asked, and some of these videos are up now. Look at my one with Octavian Pilati, part 1 and part 2. If you can't find it on LinkedIn or one of the more live platforms, simply my YouTube platforms at Family Office, and my newer one, which is much smaller, but I'm putting effort into, effectively Family Office TV. And the one that I'm going to have on stage with the Habsburgs that I'm going to illustrate and show this upcoming week, and others that I met. So thank you all for your generosity of your time and sharing to the community. So kind of some of the questions I asked: could you share how your family's approach to wealth preservation has adapted over the centuries to address changing economic and geopolitical landscapes? And what role does asset diversification, particularly in the context of global wealth dynasties, play in robust wealth preservation strategies today? And can you provide insights into specific measures or principles your family has implemented to safeguard its wealth, such as developing family charters and governance structures, as well as what assets were owned? We're going to get to some of that, and also some industries that back in the day, the families were very active in, and how the world has changed now, and probably some of my recommendations moving forward. And that's going to be coming up in a couple of minutes. So really, I hope you find to be good stuff shortly. How do you balance the preservation of traditional wealth management practices with the adoption of innovative strategies in today's rapidly evolving financial landscape? So those are an example of like 4 to 5 of the questions among many, really dozens, that I had a chance to ask. In the latter type interview that I noted with a member of the Habsburg family was really, and another gentleman, Thomas Schrock, and he was a wonderful host too, with his incredible facilities. The Natural Gem is his company, and he was such a wonderful gentleman. I appreciate his hospitality. And how about this? We know Thomas, or technically Dr. Schrock, is really cool. He has a cigar bar in his amazing offices. Anyone who has a cigar bar in their offices, like I'm in. Like you're like a 10 out of 10 in my book. But that was a multi-hour discussion. They were very, very generous with their time. Dynastic families have charters and constitutions, but these adapt over time. However, they're usually centered around synchronization and, surprisingly to some, real bottoms-up governance. Not so necessarily as much as you would think back in the day, heavy-handed, top-down, for really inclusive family listening and decision-making. One of them mentioned, even back in the 1400s, talk about being fair and equality back in the day, that the power and authority that women in the family had, especially bloodline, was incredibly valuable and important and very active in the day-to-day decisions and long-term strategic planning of the family. I see there's a question coming in, so I'll take a break for a second. Angelo, good day. I'm curious your understanding of the mindset of family offices on investment opportunities. It goes on a little longer. Thank you all for asking questions, by the way. And I am going to get to some assets and investing very shortly. And again, go watch some of the videos that I'm talking about, and that will share it more. But I think there was a general theme in that question about kind of entrepreneurship and VC that is very, very important. The interview that I just did yesterday, the part 2 with Octavian Pilati, whose family goes back about 1,100 years, talks about And this actually came from the professor at Harvard, Christina Wing, who's wonderful. Follow her stuff too on LinkedIn, did a report relative to the importance of the entrepreneurial spirit in families. And Octavian reminded that hopefully, depending on the size and scale of the family, that should kind of always happen in every generation of the family. Is everyone going to be an entrepreneur or hyper successful? Well, of course not. We all know kind of the reality of how that works out, and that's okay. But it is important to replenish both the entrepreneurial spirit within the family, globally, the impact it has on society. And by being, if you're not the direct entrepreneur yourself, being an early supporter of earlier stage companies and VC does help to accomplish that. Now, this is not quite the stage or discussion for a deep, deep dive on VC, but since you happen to brought it up, I do have a special guest this Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's kind of a rare time for me. He's a wonderful early stage investor in VC, and we may consider doing a monthly series talking about kind of the state of VC at the moment. So it's very timely. And there's just so much going on with deep tech, with AI. But again, I don't want to get too far off course. Let's get a little back on track. The greatest threat to the family is the family. But the families also realize, conversely, the greatest advantage to such of these dynastic families is also the family. It's what they make of it. It's what they do from the decision-making process of governance. I mean, there's probably 90% art here and 10% science, so it's complicated. I'm trying to keep this more of a relatively 30 to 40 minute kind of relatively brief overview of my trip. But all these subjects are subjects that I covered in depth in prior things that I've interviewed in Family Office TV and upcoming programs. And again, I like the deep stuff. I want to do deep dives. I like long form. I think the industry is flooded with a lot of garbage, a lot of fluff, a lot of sponsored speakers, a lot of just crap. And I was a bit of a part of it, although hopefully I did a better job than most. And I don't mean to, rain, I guess you could say, on the industry. I just think the family office industry, or those that service the family office industry, it could get better and better and held to a higher standard and a higher level of intellectual rigor, critical thinking, and deeper thinking. Now, whether the community cares about that is kind of debatable. I find that they often maybe simply like the fluff or don't want a spotlight put on them or don't want deeper thinking and critical thinking about how to go from mediocrity to being good. And it's really difficult to go from being good to great. Jim Collins, of course, in his great book talks about that as well. So although times have changed, dynamic families generally, how can I say this? Birth, some would say many children, as opposed to looking at this as kind of being a challenge. We don't know what the future is going to look like, or a drain on trust distributions. It's to be a dynastic family. Again, the word family isn't family. It's a family. It's coming together. It's the opportunity for family members and children and propagating, for lack of a better word, the legacy that was established within the family by the entrepreneur or further established by other entrepreneurial endeavors within the family moving forward. So I know that's another subject from a societal subject, that people are not having children as much as in the past, and the issues with global population. A deeper subject we shall cover at a bit of a different time. But again, to contribute to society, to further business and entrepreneurship, and to replenish the family's kind of financial coffers. We all know shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And no, it's not just bad finances and taxes, although sure, that's a part of it. It's more intra-family issues and challenges. And again, this is a deep subject. I've done many interviews on this, both in the past and relatively recently, and you could find some of them. So here's a little bit of insight. In the past, children of such dynastic families commonly went into effectively government, politics, military, and clergy. All 3 of those were areas of power and influence over people, especially back in the day. But again, times have changed. So, what has replaced that today? First of all, the first one that I mentioned, government slash politics, that has not changed. That is still incredibly valuable and a position of power. But now the world of media, especially being an interconnected world, the internet and social media, that's an area of influence. Media could be incredibly powerful, sadly, with a lot of misinformation that's out there. And just look at the power of the social media networks. Philanthropy could be another, the impact from a societal perspective and positioning. And I would say investment slash banking. Now, again, those also technically could go back decades to hundreds of years, but I think they've risen in their level of influence. And where you do sometimes see dynastic families looking to either, I could go with the word make an impact for the good, but also that could be used a little bit perhaps nefariously as well. Again, yet another subject for a future time. All these families had and still have, hear that again, all these families had and still have generational assets. I'm going to name 4 assets that have withstood the test of time in the past. That's no guarantee moving forward in the future. Land, gold, art, and gems. There was a thing that we mentioned out there in Vienna, especially with Dr. Thomas Schrock and the natural gem and the work that he does. In one hand, one human hand, with the right combination, I guess, of colored diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, I could potentially hold upwards of probably about $600 to $700 million USD. And that's a hell of a lot lighter than that amount of money in gold. So I've done some programming on advantage and disadvantage of practically all those assets, on land, on gold, on art, and gems. For the most part, I think the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. No, not all of them are portable. But these are the type of assets that have, over long blocks of time, withstood the test of time. Real assets and resources, as I mentioned. So the world's wealthiest families have created, owned, and controlled banks. And I did kind of hint earlier or a little while ago, although I called it a little bit more new age power investments in banks, but really going back to the Medici family, going back to a lot of what the Dutch accomplished kind of right after that and taking us into a more modern world, to banking as it would evolve into France and Great Britain, the UK, into here in the US over time. A lot of the world's powerful families are interested in creating, owning some level of control in banks. Well, it can be used as a safe haven, I guess you could say, for your money. Since you control the risk policies of the bank, you can make it as safe as necessary. People who have to keep their capital in other banks always kind of have to worry about bankruptcy risk. Yes, I know there's government interventions and protections, but to think that here in the US that there's not challenges in banks, and what if everyone wanted to go get their money? Trust me, there's a lot of systemic risk in the banking system. Another advantage, you could bring all your cash flows and all your businesses you own or invested under kind of one roof, allowing you to convert their operating cash flows into loanable money and better control of the businesses. Banks can protect your capital from inflation, you could argue, by managing the difference between the duration of liabilities and assets. And a bank gives you access to domestic and international payment systems and your ear to the grindstone of what's happening through lending in other parts of the community. Now, is a bank necessarily a great pure investment? Perhaps not. Is it a great investment in the US specifically? Maybe not. But should families of great wealth consider banks for a variety of reasons that I noted, and international domicile in the right strategic jurisdictions to some degree for wealth preservation and ear to the grindstone of what's going on, especially close to the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS in Switzerland? Of course. So 2.5 years ago, and I had him on again on a different subject, but Martin Michaels, an attorney based in Switzerland at Baker McKenzie. We do cover the issue of banks. Again, if you go on my older channel, at Family Office on YouTube, that's Martin Michaels. Should have been September or October of maybe 3 years ago. I did have Martin on just a month ago, but that was more on structuring a family office in Switzerland and more international structures. Whether family governance, assets to own, and businesses to create or invest in, again, these families have survived generation after generation. At my SFO Continuity, we have the resources and connections to best execute upon this knowledge to achieve the results that you want. It's not enough to say as a wealthy family, well, we have a charter, a constitution. There are, and by the way, on that alone, there are very, very few true professionals in the world that in coordination with the family can artfully craft a family charter and governance structure that really works in the real world. And again, what did I talk earlier about owning land, art, gold, and gems? But it doesn't really answer in what allocations, ownership structures, quality, and importantly, custodial and jurisdictional. And this is, again, probably more art than science. It's highly nuanced. And these are things that I've dedicated my life to, that I have access and connections around the world. And I certainly have worked with American families on all those subjects, both here in the United States, as well as becoming a little bit more of a global citizen with dual or sometimes 3 or 4 different levels of citizenship or residency and opportunity to have asset structures and trust, maybe a private trust company offshore. This is the deep stuff. This is not just the light fluff that you often hear at a lot of family office events where the vast majority, probably 80 to 90% of the speakers are effectively corporate engagements or sponsors of the organization. That's not to say that you may not get some good value from that, especially if you're newer. You might. To some degree, it's what you make of it. So the burden should always be on you. Stop playing the victim. It's up to you to rise from the bottom. It's up to you, if you're on top, to stay to the top. You always have to adapt and move forward, because if you're staying still, you're really falling behind, and others are very simply going to surpass you. So again, and talking a little bit again about banks, yeah, I'm a big advocate, but you got to do it right. And if you're going to do it offshore, whether it's Liechtenstein, Switzerland, or other country, you got to kind of know what you're doing and have the right professionals who are the best of the best that the multi and deca billionaires go to. And again, I spent decades building up my Rolodex, and not just talking to them on a phone or Zoom, but traveling there, going to Europe, traveling the world. So we know the questions to ask and share the insights that I glean from my decades in wealth, succession, continuity, and family offices. I have the resources and connections, and I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to learn more about what we do at SFO Continuity, and of course, even what I do as a purely deep educational module in Family Office Masterclass. And that's all available at angelorobles.com. So I provided, I guess you could say, one of my members when I came back from Austria with a comprehensive overview and kind of consultation of what I learned, including some direct opportunity for access to him. And he wrote me something back that he does allow me to share. And he stated, there are families in the US which have now built 1,000-year wealth basis. There's more than enough families here in the US that technically, if they do things right, really do have a multiple dynastic legacy that could easily, depending on if we still have a country and if we still have a world around in 1,000 years, be a 1,000-year legacy. He continues, now it's essential to understand what it means to be a truly ancient family, Turns out it's not business or wealth building, it's family and family continuity really across generations. His words, a thing which is vastly harder than the mere making of money. Thank you, Angelo, he writes. Well, again, I always enjoy to travel. Don't know if I really enjoy 9-hour plane flights on the plane, but it's you got to put up with the hard part as well. The opportunity of immersing yourself among different people, different cultures, and seeing the amazing things that other countries and other people around the world that I could learn from. The architecture and history of Vienna, the amazing families with such long histories, some of the surrounding countries, including Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Italy, Germany, just amazing. An opportunity to really learn, to be a sponge, to enjoy the amazing food. Wow. And of course, thank you, Alexander, as I mentioned earlier, for making the trip possible and for easily the best hot chocolates I've ever had. I could, no offense, Starbucks, I could probably never go into a Starbucks, and not that I ordered it that much anyway, but order a hot chocolate again, because it's just not going to be the same. Now, that being said, although from immigrants myself, obviously I'm born in America and I love the US. There's so many tremendous things here. Growing up and living in the New York area for decades and transitioning a bit to be more US centric, traveling to practically every state, setting up my business interests now in the great state of Wyoming, which I love to go to so much. So I do love Wyoming. There's so many amazing and valuable advantages to here in the US, but we do have challenges as well. We're seeing it happen now internally with kind of civil discord. Some would say practically a cold civil war. We have an election coming up here in 2024. That is going to be an interesting year. No matter what side wins, we're going to hear it from the other side. And I have grave concerns. I've tackled political and geopolitical, military, and other issues before. And I'm going to have some incredible guests on, I would say closer to 3 weeks to 4 to 5 weeks out. One of them would be highly prominent, at least to me. And I'm very excited about that. And I bring all these topics back to the world of wealth and family offices. And again, these are generally the subjects that you're not seeing covered because they are somewhat sensitive and others just simply don't want to do it. Maybe it offends a sponsor who's paying them 20, 30, 40K. I guess I don't really have to worry about that anymore. Maybe that's bad, but hopefully not. But it helps for those of you that are families, that are family office executives, and believe that my experiences and what I've built could be of value and be supportive. We don't want to drive revenue from sponsors per se. That doesn't mean that I don't love some of you, that I don't learn from you, and that we all can't mutually benefit. But it's just not really a core focus in terms of what I'm building. I'm focused and I'm dedicated to, quote unquote, the families and the family office. And I do now realize, and maybe I underrated it, and going to Austria kind of helped, the value of coming together, of in-person, of face-to-face, something that I've done, again, 400 plus events over my lifetime and have interviewed and had speak in one or the other, people like Ray Dalio, Tony Robbins, Peter Thiel, and so many others. I've been so blessed and fortunate, and I appreciate all of you that were a part of my past experiences and journey. And I hope some of you see the value in terms of what I'm doing and the opportunity to move forward. If results matter to you, access and legacy is what you're looking for, I'm incredibly confident, capable in terms of my ability to be able to deliver that. I don't see any other comments or questions coming in. I'm probably heading to the last minute or so now. But those of you that are live, I do appreciate you. I know I haven't done as many actual lives as much as I perhaps have done in the past. Now, part of that was due to all my travels in December. But again, I got a busy year upcoming. and some adaptations and changes. I know many of you are interested in from earlier stage investment opportunity to entrepreneurship to VC. And I never underestimate, although sometimes I like to get a little overly critical thinking and talk about governance and talk about structures and taxation. I know that's boring to many of you. You want to talk about high flying investments, and that's cool. I mean, I like that too. It's all good, but we're going to become even more diverse from that perspective and really listen to you and the value of what you want. And I do look to do more of my private roundtables and dinners. So perhaps some of you could be guests and participants in that. And I'll probably do something around the Milken Conference in May, like I historically do, perhaps teaming up and doing something at a private home, but I'll definitely be there. Art Basel come later in the year, probably something around the Hamptons in the summer. Hey, I know the places to go and what time of year. And multiple more trips to Europe and really around the world. And I'm open to feedback from all of you. I'm still a lifelong learner. I want to learn. Many of you have something to teach me. I greatly appreciate all of you, and have a chance to, again, if you don't, subscribe to my social medias, probably especially my LinkedIn and my YouTubes at Family Office and I guess at Family Office TV. Go to angelorobles.com to learn more about my programs and membership in terms of what I'm doing, and reach out anytime. I greatly appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful weekend. A wonderful here in the US, heading into a holiday on Monday for Martin Luther King Day. Enjoy, relax, and look forward to continuing my busy week next week, beginning officially on Tuesday. Thank you all so much. Thank you.